Welcome to our Q&A session with the university senior management team. In June, the university asked whether you would like your questions on the upcoming academic year to be answered via pre-recorded video or live stream. As you voted for a pre-recorded video, we have worked with them to organise this session today. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We received around 300 in total, and the SU and university have worked together to find the common questions, and we will be putting these to Tansy and Sarah in a minute. By way of introductions, my name is Jason Palmer. I am the Equality, Liberation and Access Officer, and my pronouns are he, him.
My name's David. I'm the Undergrad Education Officer, and my pronouns are he, him.
And then we have Tansy and Sarah with us today. So Tansy, would you like to introduce yourself first?
My name's Tansy Jessop. I've been at Bristol for a year, and I'm the Pro Vice-Chancellor Education. And it's just great to be with you today. And thanks, Jason and David, for inviting us.
Hi, I'm Sarah Purdy. I'm Pro Vice-Chancellor for Student Experience, and my pronouns are she, her. Great.
Thank you both very much. Without further ado, I think we're going to be jumping into the questions immediately. We're going to be looking at a variety of things. The first one, looking at learning and teaching and the academic experience of students.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So my first question is, what are the plans for online lecture delivery, and when will these plans be reviewed?
Brilliant, thanks David. So we've been working on a blended and flexible education plan since we've started planning for the September 2021 intake. And basically this means that there will be a blend between digital and in-person education. And the online component, what we've done is we've worked with academics in volumes. We've had a digital design course where we've had more than 1,200 academic staff participate in a week-long course to understand better how digital design and learning works. And the heart of this really is that your lecturers are planning an engaging, interactive, high-quality digital education, which will be consistent because we've had such good uptake from lecturers who are really keen to do their best at this job. So, you know, we're all learning. We're on a big journey on the digital highway or whatever it is, but there's a sense in which, as a community, certainly your lecturers have worked immensely hard to try and redesign the curriculum and make it as engaging and interactive as in-person education would be. We are planning and timetabling a mix of online and on-campus in-person education for TB1. So we're looking at TB1 and we're saying we need to be able to switch from in-person education if there's another lockdown, and we can. So this is the plan, and we will review it at the end of TB1 and see where we stand then with COVID-19. So we've got a really, I think we've got a fantastic platform to build on. I think actually Bristol's quite sector leading on this. We've really worked with our staff in a powerful way. So I'm anticipating a great digital offer.
And Tansy, is TB1, does that finish around Christmas time?
Thanks. TB1 is an acronym. Teaching Block 1 finishes around Christmas time. Thanks, Sarah. Cool.
All right, thank you. And how will that blended learning work in the assessment periods? How are students going to be assessed next year?
Yeah, so I think we've made a decision because in designing the curriculum and setting up all the unit descriptors which show the plan for the whole year, we need to do that quite strongly in advance of teaching. So all of the assessment will be online in 2021. And we're planning an online winter assessment period of a couple of weeks and a summer assessment period of 3 weeks. The important thing is we have encouraged program teams and unit directors to actually minimize exams, and so we're probably looking at an exam timetable which will be of lower weighting. Perhaps, you know, you can probably expect as a student that about 50% of exams will run. Now, some subjects are more lean towards exams, so maths and physics and chemistry, so they're likely to have exams, but other subjects sometimes use them just as a default option, and I think people are thinking creatively about how to assess students in those subjects.
And just to kind of clarify on that, the safety net that students will have experienced this term that's just been, will that continue next year or not?
No, so I think what we've decided, you know, the safety net came into play because it was such a quick pivot online. And the issues that we didn't know about were whether students would have the right kit, the right setting, the right connectivity, and it was all new. So what we're thinking is through this online transition and for people learning to work in the digital space, we are going to get better and more experienced at doing this. And to some extent, the need for a safety net diminishes, particularly as we address hardware, connectivity, and spaces where students work in a way that enables everyone to get a fair shot at it. The other thing we are doing is we're exploring something called online proctoring, only for a few subjects. It's not perfect. It's something which does the sort of work of an invigilator online. I find it a bit like surveillance, and it's not entirely bottomed out in terms of whether we want to do this, but we are looking at it because some subjects would like to do that. I think what we want to do is have consistent windows for students to write their exams in. So we've set more consistent windows. There'll be 24-hour windows, which can be time watermarked for particular exams. So there's a sense in which we've got a more consistent online offer, because during the online transition, some students felt as though they were, you know, it was different between subjects because it was such a rush. And we want most of all to get imaginative, consistent exams which or coursework which tests the things that students have been taught. So some of the teaching may change because exams will be less memory led, I think. So I think that's also quite interesting as a development.
And how will practicals and labs for students in the science faculties work in this period?
Yes, so we really are trying to extend, and we're playing around with ideas, and we're talking to you as a student union about trying to extend slightly the teaching hours, particularly so that we can enable more lab time and specialist space time. What we're thinking is that labs may, I think a lot of programs in life sciences and sciences and health sciences think that they may have slightly more extended labs for the same cohort or groups of cohorts, you know, segmented, so that you'll end up having labs less frequently, but you can kind of deep clean between labs. I think the other thing that will be interesting in labs is we're likely to enable students to wear proper, you know, PPE kit in labs, because there's quite a lot of gaseous exchange and whatever, and we don't want it to be COVID-19. So I think we're going to kit students out properly for lab work.
Yeah, and what support is the uni going to be giving students who don't have reliable Wi-Fi or who experience like other barriers to accessing their education online?
Yeah, so we understand absolutely that digital equity is an issue, and there's a massive digital divide, and it's, you know, it's rural, urban, it's also richer, poorer, and I think we really need to address this. So our academic registrar is currently writing a digital equity policy, and flowing from that, our chief information officer is looking at issues of connectivity, looking at hardware for students, and looking at a laptop system which we will enable students thereby to have the right kit. So I think we're on the case of that. It's not finished yet, so I can't tell you exactly what it looks like. But I know our institutional recovery group are working on that at the moment, and our academic registrar is at the center of that working.
And that will be ready for the start of next year?
Yeah, absolutely. If not before.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm going to pick up now with some questions related to the academic experience of students. And one of the questions that came through quite a bit, and I'm sure is on the mind of our international students particularly, is the question, can I study at home if I don't feel safe to return or cannot due to travel restrictions?
Okay, an interesting and complicated question, really. I think the first thing to say is that the University of Bristol is really encouraging as many students as possible to come back, because we're making campus as COVID safe as possible, and there are lots of mitigations we're putting in place to enable that to happen. We also believe firmly in the university project, that actually it's not just about what you learn intellectually, but there's a social element to it, and there are all sorts of things that wrap around university that we want to try and build on as far as possible. We know that, you know, it's a difficult circumstance, very challenging, but we want to do that as possible. But for students who are potentially international students who have global travel restrictions, on certain courses that may be 100% fine if they can't get to Bristol. They signed up, they want to study what they're studying. We certainly will have an online baseline which enables students to study well in a lot of subjects, but there are other subjects where you can't get your degree without some in-person education. Medicine is one. You need to do some clinical work. Science subjects, some STEM subjects, some accredited programs like engineering. So students will need to check with their schools and their programs to understand whether their program actually requires them to do some in-person education. But on the whole, we believe it's a fantastic thing for students to come back for a number of other reasons. So we're really encouraging that. We think you can get a decent, and it will be a good digital offer, but at the same time, I think it's quite exciting and enabling for students to be here if they can.
Great, and sort of digging into that a little bit further, how will you ensure that people that engage online are getting value out of their degree, so getting that Bristol education?
Yeah, so I'm pretty confident that our reach to, you know, more than 1,200 academics with the digital design course, and even the early online pivot in April, May, showed that some students, I've had emails from them, had a fantastically engaging experience online. And we want to replicate that fantastically engaging experience online. So students come, they get a different education, it's in a different mode, offers more opportunity for writing, for slow thinking, for thought-provoking work, you know. It's different, but it's of equal value. I'm absolutely confident, and having seen some of the designs and ways of thinking that our lecturers are pursuing for their online education, it's imaginative, it's interesting, it's engaging, it's interactive, it's all the things you'd wish for in a good education. So I'm, you know, while you can guarantee nothing, I'm pretty clear in my own heart that things are moving in a fantastically positive direction for the digital piece.
Great, thank you very much. And you sort of touched on this earlier, but what type of measures are the university going to be putting in place to ensure the health and safety of students once they return to campus?
I think that's a Sarah question.
Great.
Thanks. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I'll take over and give Tansy a break. So it's a really good question. So we're following the government guidance, which of course is changing rapidly, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And will probably change again between now and when we physically reopen campus in the autumn. But let me give you an outline of the things that we have planned and the things that are happening now for those postgraduate students and staff who are already back on campus. So we're implementing social distancing measures across all our buildings. For example, we'll have dedicated entrance and exits and one-way systems. We have capacity restrictions on spaces. So until recently, we were working with a 2-meter rule between any individual. That's now gone to 1 meter plus with appropriate mitigations. So we're ensuring that we follow those rules and we put in place the mitigations the government recommends. We will be using one-way systems and signs on doors and things to remind people about COVID-19 and what they should be doing and not doing. We'll have stepped up cleaning regimes, disinfecting, and additional hand washing and sanitizing. We will be recommending, and this is yet to be formally agreed, but that we will have face coverings for students and staff while they're on campus, so in our teaching buildings and research buildings. What we need to consider there, of course, is there may be individuals where wearing a face covering that can't be seen, where you can't see their mouth, may be disadvantageous. So we're thinking about that at the moment, thinking what else we could put in place to ensure the safety of staff and students where there are people who may be adversely affected by that. We're also going to be working with public health locally to have testing in place, so testing and tracing for students. And the final thing, I guess, is we're thinking about a second spike and what we might need to do if that happens. So when we're making our plans for teaching, for accommodation and for our buildings, we're thinking about what would happen if we had a situation where we have to make more restrictions as a result of the second spike.
Great, thank you very much for that information. And of course, students will be learning more as the university finds out more as well.
Great. So kind of shifting topics a bit, a conversation that's been really hot in student spaces and has been talked about a lot is tuition fees. And we've got a lot of feedback, and one question that students were asking is that the educational experience is changing quite a lot. So will that result in a reduction in tuition fees?
Okay, and I can understand why students are asking this, and we appreciate that blended learning, or indeed online learning, that we've had over the last few weeks is not what students anticipated they would get when they signed up to come to university. The current situation is that there is the government has not agreed or advised that there should be student refunds. However, I understand that even as of today, so it's the 13th of July, there has been further discussion within government about student refunds. So obviously, if we get an update about that, we will let people know. But the current position is that we are endeavouring to deliver the best education we can in the circumstances, and refunds are currently not on the table.
And just to clarify, that's for all students, including international students who are paying more.
That's right, and obviously any UK government discussions would probably relate to UK students rather than international students.
Great, thank you very much. And looking more at campus spaces, what's happening with libraries? Will libraries and other study spaces be open for students to use? What's the plan?
Yes, absolutely. The normal social distancing protocols will operate, so it will be the 1 meter plus. So it's 1 meter plus mitigations, but I think that our spaces will be open for business. And it's a vital part of student learning is that they get access to libraries and study spaces. So absolutely, they will be open.
Right. How will wellbeing support operate in a blended environment?
Thanks, David. Well, our wellbeing team, so wellbeing access and the other support services like disability services and counselling, etc., went to online sort of overnight when COVID caused the lockdown. And I think that they've done a great job. They've been working online with students using Zoom and other modalities to talk to students and keep their support and therapy going. We're just coming into the last few days of our COVID wellbeing survey, so we'll be asking students what their experience of that was like in order to try and ensure we improve on that for the autumn where we can. The other thing we're doing over the summer is we're just looking at our wellbeing web pages to make sure there is clear, succinct, easy to follow as possible, and we've had student feedback into that to try and get that as good as possible. So for those students who, for example, aren't on campus and can't approach a wellbeing advisor face to face, they find the web interaction as easy to use as possible.
Is there any provision for like other well-being concerns brought about by COVID?
A number of things to think about there. We know that there are some groups who have been particularly affected by COVID as well as by other recent events, and we've extended the provision for students to work with NILARI, which is a group in Bristol that provides culturally appropriate counselling services and support for Black, Asian and minority ethnic people. So we have increased the support for that provision. We are also, which is free to students, and we can refer on to that through the Wellbeing Service. The other thing we're doing is thinking about what we need to put in place for the autumn, thinking about some of the adverse experiences a wider group of young people may have had because of COVID, so how we best support them. So the wellbeing teams are working on that at the moment with the counselling teams and others involved in those services.
Great. Thank you so much for that information. And sort of looking at another aspect of the student experience, we've chatted about education and academics, but I think students are also really keen to figure out what their social life is going to look like. So a lot of the questions on student minds are around accommodation. And sort of as a starting question, when are we allowed to move into accommodation?
So I'm assuming you're still talking about university accommodation here, Jason. So I'm thinking about halls of residence and university run accommodation. Yep, so I've got some dates on that and they should be on the website very soon. So tenancies for undergraduate and postgraduate students will begin on the 18th of September. And there'll be booking slots for students to book to arrive at their allocated residence over an extended sort of start period from then until the 5th of October when term starts. The reason for that is that some students will be coming from overseas, so they'll need to come 2 weeks before they want to be able to get out and about if they're coming from a country that means that they have to have 2 weeks of quarantine. So we'll be confirming arrival dates with room offers, but we're asking students if there are particular reasons why they'd need to come at a certain time. The good news is the first week of that tenancy will be free, so nobody will be charged until the 26th of September, even if students need to arrive early. There are a few courses, of course, that start earlier than that, and we're making provision for those students to come earlier in the summer as they need to for the various preliminary courses they might have, or because their course starts earlier.
Great. And sort of digging slightly deeper into this, what can students expect? What will accommodation look like? And will things like social distancing be implemented in halls as well?
So as we're thinking about how it's going to look like in the teaching campus, we need to obey the government guidelines. So we're looking at, first of all, we're looking at students travelling to Bristol from other countries. We're looking at implementing a safe and comfortable quarantine experience for them. So we're making plans for airport collections and other travel arrangements for those students, as well as support while they have to be in quarantine. Then thinking about students in accommodation more generally, what we're going to do is have something called living circles, which are based on the concept of social bubbles. So students in halls will be in a living circle with the people that they associate closely on a daily basis. And this will probably be bigger than one student apartment of 6 to 8. It's probably going to be up to around 15 students, sometimes slightly more. And within that living circle, you don't need to socially isolate. So you can share the kitchen, you can share a sitting room area, watch TV together, as you would with your household if you live in a household when you're not at university. Obviously, it'll still be really important to observe hand hygiene and cleanliness and things like that. And we're asking students when they opt for their accommodation choice to tell us a bit more things about them this year to help us allocate them to those living circles. For example, do they drink alcohol? Would they rather be in a non-alcohol drinking apartment or bubble or circle? Would they like to live with an LGBT plus friendly group? Those are the sorts of questions we're asking, in addition to all the normal questions we ask about accommodation. So outside that living circle, it really depends on what the government guidance is. So if the government guidance is relaxed more, then we can be much more relaxed about students getting together into larger groups for social events. But of course, there's nothing to stop you socialising with people outside your living circle, but you need to observe the metre plus social distancing. You're not required to wear a face mask, of course, unless you're in an environment like the teaching areas where we're going to ask people to do that. So in the same way, we've been seeing people sitting out on the downs chatting together and around in the gardens around the university and halls of residence, that will definitely be something that will be fine, even if we have the current measures of lockdown.
Great. And of course, thousands of our students are within university-owned accommodation, but what guidance are you offering for students that are living in private accommodation?
So we've got quite a lot of guidance on the website and we're continuing to update that. So I'd really recommend looking at that, but just a few key pointers. Check with the landlord or letting agency the property is ready for you to move in. Try and plan your move everything in one go if you can. And if you're moving from a university hall of accommodation or residence into private, just check it's okay to pick your stuff up, because we're trying to make sure that that's done in a socially distanced way, as well as ensuring that you're able to do that at a convenient time. And finally, I think just a plea from me, lots of students are currently in Bristol having a great time meeting up and seeing each other, which is really good to see. But just remember to respect the local community who may be nervous about their own health and may not understand about shared houses and students being in larger groups, because that's just how they live together. You know, try to remember the people around you may be worried about their own health and respect that. So thank you to all of those who've been doing that so far.
Great.
So firstly, will there be a welcome week, and like what will the general induction period look like this year?
Okay, great. Thank you, David. So this is, I think, is a joint response from us and the SU, and I think you're hopefully going to talk a little bit about some of the SU focused things as well. But from the university side of things, we're going to have some online for first years and new postgraduate taught students who are joining us from the 28th of September. So that's the week before everyone needs to be ready to start learning, if you like. So that can be done in your own time. So we'll be using modules that we've chosen with colleagues from your previous group of sabbatical officers to help introduce people to coming to university, some of the things you might need to think about coming to uni, student life, thinking about finances, thinking about some of the things you might come up against at university you might not have come up against before in terms of your social life and how to deal with those. So those will be available online, but then the first week of term, excuse me, will be the 5th of October. We'll start that week, and at the very beginning of the week will be around having some induction to digital learning, a bit more induction to being a student at Bristol, but then quite quickly getting into learning about your school and your programme and being introduced to that. And I think you're going to have an SU welcome fair.
Yeah, just from the SU side, the welcome fair is going to happen. It's going to be a virtual experience, and so it's all going to be online. We're working with the university to find a date where we can timetable in something so that everybody can attend the welcome fair, but it will be like the normal kind of live interactions between society committees and people coming, so people will be able to come into like go to the virtual stalls and talk live to the people manning those stalls. I think that societies have been given some guidance now as to what it's going to look like. That we're putting it together, and we're working with some of the best like virtual online fair like producers in the country. So hopefully that will be a really engaging experience for everyone. So back to like the university side of things, how will, I guess, all students be inducted into like this new blended learning, digital learning like space? How's that gonna work?
David, we're working on something quite exciting here. We've got a number of colleagues, some from the Bristol Institute for Learning and Teaching and our Digital Education Office, and we're hoping to work with you, particularly the education officers, but with some students. But what we're planning is a similar sort of an hour a day for 5 days in the week 0, the week before term begins, to actually induct people, and we're not doing it as a huge university induction. We're hoping to work with schools and with their digital champions. Every school's got a couple of digital champions who have helped with the online transition, and we're hoping to work with them so that it has a kind of school flavor, so that you're with peers. If you're a student, you're with people from your own school, learning about how your school is going to run the blended learning. But we're also going to take you through, what synchronous sessions are like, how to use the chat, some of the sort of rules of engagement of digital learning, and then also some of the ways to manage your time to do some of the asynchronous, which is kind of online, offline. It's prepared beforehand, but you do it offline. How you use that to maximal effect, and how you build community in these environments, because they're not arid spaces. They're spaces where you can build community. So we're going to work on that and come up with a plan for a sort of an hour a day for 5 days, probably asynchronous, but maybe with a little bit of synchronous stuff in it as well. But we're hoping to do it school by school for that week before term begins. So what we really want to happen is the student learning experience to meet the staff learning experience about digital design, so that you're on the same page when you start. That's our aspiration.
Thank you.
And David touched on this when he was answering the question about the welcome fair, but one of the questions that came through was, will societies be able to run as normal? What about sport? And I'll pick this up really quickly, just to explain where the union's thinking is at the moment. I think our union affairs officers and sport and student development, both ex and current, have planned or released communications already to student groups. And throughout we'll be supporting students to run the best society that they can, given the circumstances that we're operating in. What this means is that it's probably going to be in a blended environment with a mixture of in-person and online support and activity. And in relation to support specifically, our development team is working round the clock to support student groups. Recently, they put on Committee Fest. Groups can access information online for running a society in a COVID world, and there will also be cash grants available for groups that are really struggling to run as they previously were as a result of circumstances. With regard to sports, the signs are encouraging at the moment, but we're waiting for more government guidelines in relation to what this actually looks like. So once we're able to adhere with safe plans, there will also be more information being released to students. Of course, we want to support sport as much as we possibly can. And when term 2 starts, so in January time, we'll also have more information from Bucks, who will be able to inform us as to what their competition schedule looks like. In the meantime, we'll be working with Sports, Exercise and Health to set up more local competitions to support sports teams and students in Bristol. Sort of following on from that though, and looking more at the university's attitude towards societies and student groups, what measures will the university be taking to ensure that there's space for extracurricular activities, which I'm sure we all agree enrich students' lives quite a bit?
Thanks, Jason. Well, to pick up on sport, first of all, the good news is that Sports, Exercise and Health have been able to open quite a lot of their outdoor training facilities, the tennis courts and things already, which is great. And that the indoor gyms and pools and leisure centres can reopen to the public from the 25th of July. I haven't got the latest update from Sports, Exercise and Health on when our facilities will be open, but knowing they can now open them, I'm sure they'll be working hard to get as many of those open for September as possible. I know they're very keen to do that. And then in terms of the other sorts of spaces that are really important for student activities, so what we're doing is we're looking at the spaces like the communal rooms in the UOB Hall owned residences. So there's some of those big spaces up in Stoke Bishop halls that are great for organising events, and to identify how we can get the most out of each space for a range of physical and face-to-face and social activities, as well as virtual activities where that's appropriate. So we'll try to move out unnecessary furniture and things so that we can create as much space as possible for students to use those spaces safely for larger gatherings. And we're creating a booking system so that those can be booked online, so that different groups can identify appropriate spaces for the activity that they'd like to hold, and it's safe and appropriate for them to do so. And then hopefully that we'll get some decent weather in the autumn, because we're looking at maximising the use of our outside spaces with some marquees and awnings and things like that. So that's what we're trying to just look at all the space we have and use it as creatively as possible in a safe way.
Great, thank you very much. And sort of a final question to wrap things up, but I'm sure of magnanimous importance given the students that we're trying to support. What are the university doing to make sure that student voices are involved in the decision making?
Shall I take that one? So obviously doing things like this is really important, because students fed in the questions that we were able to, you've then put to us, and we've been able to hopefully go some way towards answering. We have continued student input to all our committee structures, both sabbatical officers and, for example, network chairs who are represented in the education committee, student experience committee, mental health and wellbeing committee. The decisions we've taken so far, we have tried to consult with students as much as possible. Sabbatical officers have been involved. We've also run student advisory group, where we've got a group of students together and sounded out ideas about things before making decisions. And we've just held one of those around the teaching week to see what things will be more acceptable. And I know that, for example, sabbatical officer colleagues are going to consult with network chairs and sports leaders around the teaching week this week. So again, trying to use those channels to consult with students. And in addition to that, we have a COVID-19 education and student experience collaboration group, where University, Tansy, myself and other people involved in education and student experience meet with the sabbatical officers and anyone else who needs to be involved to discuss plans as we go forward. That's been a weekly meeting. I'm hopeful over the summer we might be able to make it a little less frequent to allow people to have a bit of a break, but it will continue and ramp up again in the autumn.
Yeah. Specifically on the education front, your education sabbatical officers, Leah and David, and in the past Hilary and Chris, have been part of something called Education Planning Group, and that meets twice a week. It has been meeting during the really hot time 3 times a week, and all of the policy documentation, like the safety net policy, that ran through the sabbatical officers, and they consulted to ascertain whether it was the right line of direction of travel. And of course the education sabbatical officers are also on University Education Committee and can draw in network chairs on appropriate. We have things called deep dives, so we look at things like decolonizing the curriculum, for example, well-being, and draw in appropriate network chairs for those. So it's wonderful to be able to work with the sabbatical officers and to hear student voices. We know that the student union itself, the employees of the student union, have been key in triggering a lot of those discussions as well. It really helps us understand the student community and get a sense of how people are feeling and make decisions that are more consultative, and I think better decisions for that. So thank you.
Great. like to thank you both very much for your time and involvement with this Q&A. I think that brings us to an end for the questions for today, but there is an FAQ up on the website which should cover some of these questions and updated as the university gets more information. And of course, if you have any further questions, you can also get in touch with either David or myself or the other sabbatical officers who will be talking to Sarah and Tansy quite frequently. So thank you very much for your time. And to the students watching, I'm sure we'll get back to you soon with even more information once we have it too.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Take care too. Thanks, Jason and David, and thank you to Rachel for your signing. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.